Hi everyone, my name is Lydia Marin Whitaker. I'm 33 years old. When I was 13, my parents left me at a train station with $4, a dead phone, and my sister laughing through the back window. And 20 years later, when my phone showed 29 missed calls from them, I knew something had finally happened that they couldn't blame on me. The station was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I remember that because I stared at the blue sign above the ticket machines until the letters blurred. Harrisburg. Like, if I memorized the word hard enough, it would become a place I belonged. My dad, Russell Whitaker, had pulled up to the curb like he was just letting someone out for coffee. My mom, Elaine, sat in the passenger seat holding her purse in her lap, both hands locked over the clasp. She wouldn't look at me. My sister, Brielle, was 15, pretty in that careless way that made adults forgive her before she even finished lying. She leaned between the front seats, smiling with her lip gloss shining. "I bet she won't last an hour," she said. That was the bet. Not a joke. Not a lesson. A bet. Earlier that afternoon, Brielle had told my parents I ruined her audition tape for a school arts program. She said I was jealous. She said I unplugged the camcorder while she was singing. The truth was, she had forgotten to charge the battery. But truth had never been as useful in our house as Brielle's tears. My dad didn't ask me what happened. He never did. He just said, "If you want to act helpless, Lydia, let's see how helpless you really are." Then he drove for almost an hour while I sat in the back seat with my backpack on my knees, thinking he was taking me to my aunt's house, or maybe to scare me. Brielle kept giggling every few minutes. My mother kept saying, "Russell, don't make it dramatic." But she never told him to stop. When he parked at the station, he turned around and held out 4 crumpled $1 bills. "Call us when you're ready to apologize," he said. "My phone's dead," I whispered. He shrugged. "Then figure it out." I looked at my mother. I still remember the tiny gold cross at her throat, and the way her thumb rubbed it like she was the one in danger. "Mom?" She stared through the windshield. "Elaine," my dad said, impatient. She opened the door, stepped out, and removed my backpack from the trunk. She set it beside me on the sidewalk, very gently, like careful handling made abandonment less ugly. Then she got back in the car. Brielle rolled down her window as they pulled away. "Don't get kidnapped," she called. Then she laughed. The taillights disappeared behind a bus, and that was the moment my childhood split cleanly in half. Before that day, I thought being less loved was something I could fix. Better grades, quieter footsteps, doing dishes before being asked, letting Brielle choose the TV show, giving her the last cupcake, lying for her when she snuck out, smiling when my parents said, "Your sister is sensitive. You're stronger." After that day, I understood. They didn't think I was stronger. They thought I was disposable. I stood beside those ticket machines for nearly 20 minutes because I was too embarrassed to cry in front of strangers. That is what people don't understand about humiliation. Fear comes later. First comes shame. A woman in a red coat asked if I was okay, and I said yes because I had been trained to protect my parents from looking bad. I tried my phone anyway. The screen flashed for half a second, then died again. I had $4, no charger, no numbers memorized except home, and the terrible knowledge that if I called, my father might actually let it ring. So, I went inside. The station smelled like burnt coffee, wet coats, and old metal. I bought a vending machine pack of crackers for $1.25. Because I thought if I saved the rest, I could survive longer. I sat on a bench near a family with 2 little boys, hoping people would assume I belonged to them. At 8:14 p.m., a security guard named Mr. Bell asked where my parents were. I lied again. "They're parking." He looked at the entrance, then back at me. For 3 hours? That was when I started crying. Not loud. Not dramatically. Just the kind of crying that leaks out when your body finally admits what your mouth won't. "Mister?" Bell took me to a small office with a fan rattling in the corner. He gave me a paper cup of water and let me use the landline. I called home. My mother answered on the 4th ring. "Mom," I said. There was silence. Then, in the background, I heard Brielle say, "Told you," less than an hour. My mother covered the receiver, but not enough. "She's at the station," she said. My father's voice came through sharp and bored. "Ask if she's ready to apologize." I pressed the phone so hard to my ear it hurt. "I didn't ruin the tape," I said. My mother sighed, not worried, annoyed. "Lydia, this is not the time to be stubborn." "I'm scared." Another pause. Then she said the sentence that stayed in my bones for 20 years. "Then maybe remember this feeling the next time you try to hurt your sister." Mr. Bell was standing close enough to hear. I watched his face change. Not shock exactly. Recognition. Like he had met families like mine before, and hated that he couldn't drag decency out of them by force. He took the phone gently from my hand. "Ma'am," he said, calm but cold. "Your minor child is alone at a train station. You need to come get her." My mother said something I couldn't hear. Brielle had come too, wearing pajama pants and a smug little smile, like she didn't want to miss the ending. My father didn't hug me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He pointed at me and said, "You embarrassed us." Mr. Bell stepped between us. "No," he said. "You did that yourselves." For 1 second, nobody moved. Then my mother's face went red, and my father grabbed my backpack like it weighed nothing. On the ride home, no one spoke until Brielle leaned toward me in the dark and whispered, "You always make everything so serious." I stared out the window and made myself a promise. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But someday, I would stop begging people to love me just because they were supposed to. And I kept that promise so quietly, so patiently, that when my parents finally called 29 times in one night, they had no idea the daughter they were calling had already survived the worst thing they could do to her. After the train station, my parents acted like nothing had happened. That was the strangest part. The next morning, my mother knocked once on my bedroom door and came in carrying a basket of clean laundry. "You have school," she said. My eyes were swollen from crying. I had slept maybe 2 hours, still wearing the clothes from the station, because changing felt like admitting I was home. "Mom," I whispered, "why did you leave me there?" She placed my folded jeans on the dresser. "Your father and I made a decision." "A decision to leave me?" Her mouth tightened. "Lydia, you are old enough to understand consequences." I waited for her to soften, to sit beside me, to say they went too far, to say she had been scared too. Instead, she picked a piece of lint off my sweater. "And if anyone asks," she added, "we went for a drive, and you had a tantrum. I don't want rumors." That was the moment I stopped calling her mom in my head. She became Elaine. My father, Russell, didn't speak to me for 3 days except to say, "Move," or "You're in the way." Brielle, however, was thrilled. She had discovered a new power. For weeks, whenever my parents weren't listening, she would whisper, "Harrisburg." Just that one word. If I reached for cereal before her, Harrisburg. If I sat in the front seat, Harrisburg. If I objected to anything she wanted, "Careful, Lydia. Dad knows where the station is." And I learned something important. Cruelty doesn't always roar. Sometimes it giggles from the hallway. At school, I became invisible on purpose. Before, I used to raise my hand. I liked history. I liked science. I loved writing essays because paper was the only place adults listened from beginning to end. After, I kept my head down. I saved lunch money when I could. I memorized bus routes. I wrote phone numbers inside the back cover of my notebooks: police, child services, Mr. Bell's office extension at the station. I never called them. Not then. Because fear is complicated when you are a child. I was terrified of being left again, but I was also terrified of being taken away. My parents had planted that fear carefully. "You think foster homes are better?" Russell said once, when a news story came on about a neglected kid. "You'd be begging to come back." Brielle looked at me over her bowl of ice cream and smiled. So, I made plans in silence. At 14, I started babysitting for neighbors and told Elaine they paid me $5 when they paid me $20. I hid the rest inside an old stuffed rabbit whose seam I opened and stitched back badly. At 15, I got a weekend job shelving books at a church thrift store. The woman who ran it, Mrs. Alvarez, noticed everything. "You always take the late bus?" she asked one rainy Saturday. "Yes, ma'am." "Do your parents know it's dark by then?" I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "They're busy." She didn't push. She just started giving me extra food by mistake. A wrapped sandwich, a bruised apple, a container of soup. People like Mrs. Alvarez saved my life in small portions. At home, Brielle became exactly who my parents had trained her to be. Beautiful, talented, untouchable. If she failed a test, the teacher was jealous. If she scratched Elaine's car, the mailbox was too close to the driveway. If she came home drunk at 16, Russell said, "Teenagers experiment." When I got a B+ in geometry, he asked, "What happened?" I don't tell you this because I need pity. I'm telling you because by the time the 29 calls came, none of it was surprising. The emergency was never that they had changed. The emergency was that their favorite daughter had finally become expensive. The first crack came during my senior year. I had been accepted to Temple University with a partial scholarship. Not full, but enough that if I worked, lived cheap, and took loans, I could leave. I kept the envelope hidden for 2 weeks. Then Elaine found it. I came home from school and saw it on the kitchen table, sliced open with a butter knife. Russell sat at the head of the table. Brielle leaned against the counter, eating grapes. "What is this?" he asked. "A college acceptance." "I can read." I stood still. He tapped the page. "Philadelphia?" "Yes. That's 2 hours away." "I know." Elaine folded her arms. "You applied without telling us?" "Yes." Brielle laughed softly. "Wow. Sneaky." Russell looked at her, then back at me. "And how exactly do you think you're paying for this?" "Scholarships, work, loans." "Loans?" He said it like I had announced a plan to rob banks. Then Elaine said, "What about your sister?" I blinked. "What about her?" "Brielle wants to take classes at the Performing Arts Academy downtown. We told her we'd help if we could." My stomach went cold. Russell slid the acceptance letter across the table. "You've always been practical. Community college is practical. You can stay home, help around here, save money. Your sister's opportunity is time-sensitive." There it was again. Brielle's dream was an emergency. Mine was an inconvenience. "No," I said. The kitchen went silent. It was the first clean no I had ever given them. No explanation, no apology. Just no. Russell stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "What did you say?" I said, "No, I'm going to Temple." Elaine's eyes narrowed, not hurt. Calculating. "After everything we've done for you?" I almost asked her to list it. Instead, I picked up my letter. Brielle stepped closer and whispered, "Harrisburg." Something in me turned calm. I looked at her and said, "If you ever say that word to me again, I'll tell everyone why you say it." Her smile disappeared. Russell slammed his hand on the table. "Don't threaten your sister." "I'm not threatening her. I'm telling the truth." That night, my bedroom door was removed from its hinges. Russell said privacy was a privilege. Elaine stood behind him holding the screws in her palm like little silver teeth. I slept under a blanket facing the wall, while Brielle walked past my open doorway 3 times, humming. 2 weeks later, my stuffed rabbit disappeared. All my babysitting money. All my thrift store money. Nearly $2,000 saved over 4 years. Gone. I tore my room apart. I checked drawers, vents, coat pockets, the trash outside. I knew who took it, but knowing and proving were different things in that house. At dinner, Brielle wore a new silver bracelet. "Pretty," Elaine said. "Thanks," Brielle replied, looking right at me. "I bought it myself." I didn't scream. That's what they wanted. A scene. Proof that I was unstable, dramatic, difficult Lydia. Instead, I went to Mrs. Alvarez the next morning and told her everything. Not all of it. Not the station. Not yet. But enough. She listened without interrupting. Then she locked the thrift store door, turned the sign to closed, and made a phone call. 2 days later, I met her niece, Marisol, who rented a tiny room to college students in North Philadelphia. She said I could move in after graduation and pay what I could until I found work. Mrs. Alvarez also helped me open a bank account my parents couldn't touch. When graduation came, Elaine cried in every photo. You'd think she was losing a daughter. Really, she was losing staff. Russell gave me a card with $50 in it and said, "Don't come crawling back." Brielle hugged me in front of relatives, perfume sweet and poisonous. In my ear, she whispered, "You'll fail." I hugged her back just tightly enough to make her uncomfortable. Then I whispered, "Watch me." I left 2 mornings later before sunrise with 1 suitcase, my documents, and the acceptance letter folded inside my shoe. Nobody woke up to say goodbye. I stood at the end of the driveway waiting for Mrs. Alvarez, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't scare me. It sounded like freedom. Freedom, I learned, is not the same thing as peace. My first room in Philadelphia was barely bigger than my old closet. The radiator hissed all night. The window faced a brick wall. The mattress sagged so badly I had to sleep diagonally. I loved it. No one opened my drawers. No one listened outside my door. No one decided my paycheck belonged to Brielle's future. I worked mornings at a campus cafe, afternoons at the library, and weekends doing inventory for a bookstore near Rittenhouse. I took classes with students who complained when their parents called too often, and I would smile like I understood. Sometimes Elaine left voicemails. Not apologies. Never apologies. Your father needs help moving boxes from the garage. Brielle has a showcase next Friday. It would be nice if you supported your sister. Your tone in your last message was very cold, Lydia. I stopped answering by Thanksgiving. By sophomore year, I had changed my number. That was the first time I chose silence and didn't feel guilty. Temple wasn't easy. I was poor in ways that made everything heavier. I counted quarters for laundry. I stretched rice and eggs for days. I once walked 40 blocks in the rain because my SEPTA card was empty and I needed the money for a textbook. But poverty did not scare me the way my family did. Poverty was honest. It said, "You have $8. My family said, "You owe us everything, and we owe you nothing." I studied social work first, then switched to nonprofit administration after an internship at a youth shelter. The first night I sat with a 14-year-old girl who had been kicked out by her mother's boyfriend. She kept insisting it was her fault. I recognized the script. I heard my own voice in hers. So, I told her what Mr. Bell had told my mother without knowing he was also telling me, "This is not a parenting strategy." She cried so hard her shoulders shook. After that, I knew what I wanted to do. I built a life out of helping kids survive the moment when the adults around them failed. At 24, I became program coordinator for a small crisis housing nonprofit. At 27, I was deputy director. At 30, I took over as executive director after our founder retired. My name started appearing in articles, local news interviews, fundraising panels, a city council award for youth advocacy. That was when the emails began. Elaine found my work. Maybe they loved you the only way they knew how. No. There it was in black and white. You were not an easy child either. I put it in a folder labeled, "Remember." Brielle's messages were different. She sent them through social media accounts with polished photos and inspirational quotes in her bio. "Hey, Lids. Long time. I know things were weird when we were kids, but we should get coffee. I'm doing some exciting things, and I think we could help each other." Weird. That was her word for abandonment, theft, threats, and years of making my fear into a joke. I blocked her. Then came the voicemail when I was 31. "Lydia, it's Brielle." Her voice was breathy, theatrical. I'm in a really transformative season, and I've been doing inner work. I forgive you for the resentment you've carried. I hope one day you can forgive yourself too. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes the body chooses laughter when rage would burn the house down. I saved that voicemail too. By then, I had people, real people. Marisol, who still called me Mija, even after I stopped renting her room. Mrs. Alvarez, retired but unstoppable, who mailed me grocery store coupons I no longer needed. My best friend Jonah, a public defender with a crooked smile and an allergy to nonsense. And Daniel. Daniel came into my life through a broken copier. He worked for a foundation considering a grant for our nonprofit, and during his site visit, the printer jammed so violently it sounded like a machine gun. I knelt to fix it, he knelt too, and we bumped heads. "Great," he said, rubbing his forehead. "Now if I don't fund you, it'll look personal." I smiled before I could stop myself. He was gentle without being soft. Funny, without needing an audience. The first man I dated who did not interpret my independence as rejection. When I finally told him about Harrisburg, we were sitting on my kitchen floor eating takeout from cartons, because I still preferred floors when conversations felt dangerous. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say, "But they're your parents." He didn't ask what I did to make them that angry. He only said, "I'm so sorry no one came sooner." I married him a year later in a courthouse ceremony with 12 people present. Mrs. Alvarez cried into a tissue. Jonah gave a toast that was mostly legal threats disguised as jokes. Marisol brought flowers from her own garden. I did not invite my parents. 3 months after the wedding, Elaine sent a card to my office. "We heard you got married. It would have been nice to be included. You only get one family." I wrote one sentence on a sticky note and put it in the folder. Exactly. At 33, my life was not perfect, but it was mine. Daniel and I had a small row house with blue shutters and a stubborn lemon tree in a pot by the window. I had a job that mattered. I had friends who knew the difference between love and possession. And then, on a cold Tuesday in February, I finished a donor meeting, silenced my phone for an hour, and came back to find it vibrating across my desk like something alive. 29 missed calls. Unknown number. Then one from Elaine. Then Russell. Then Elaine again. Then a number I hadn't seen in years, but recognized instantly, because trauma has a terrible memory. Brielle. My throat went dry. There were 11 voicemails. I sat down slowly. For a full minute, I did nothing. I watched the screen light up again. Elaine calling. I let it ring. Daniel, who had come by to take me to dinner, saw my face and closed my office door. "What happened?" I turned the phone toward him. He read the names. His expression changed. "Do you want me to listen first?" I almost said yes. But I was 13 once, sitting in a security office while adults discussed whether I deserved rescue. I was not 13 anymore. "No," I said. "I'll hear it." I pressed play on the first voicemail. At first, all I heard was breathing. Then Elaine's voice came through, thin and shaking. "Lydia, please call me back. It's your sister." A pause. A sob she tried to swallow. "Brielle's been arrested." I played the voicemail twice, not because I didn't understand it, because part of me had waited 20 years for a sentence that began with panic and ended with Brielle. "Brielle's been arrested." Daniel sat beside me without touching me, giving me room to decide what my body needed. That was one of the many ways I knew he loved me. He didn't make my emergencies about his instincts. I played the next voicemail. Russell. "Lydia, pick up the phone. This is serious. Your mother is falling apart. Brielle made a mistake, and we need help." A mistake. That word again. In my family, mistakes were things Brielle did. Crimes were things I did by existing at the wrong volume. The third voicemail was Elaine, crying harder. "She needs an attorney!" A good one. Then the public defender vanished, and the friend appeared. "Are you safe?" That was his first question. Not what did she do? Not are your parents okay? Are you safe? I closed my eyes. I think so. They said my name came up. Fraud? Identity theft. Do not speak to any of them in detail, Jonah said immediately. Do not confirm personal information. Do not agree to help. Forward me the voicemails. I'll find out what I can. Within an hour, he called back. His voice had changed again. Controlled, angry. Lydia Brielle was arrested this morning after trying to withdraw funds from a business account using forged documents. What business account? A pause. Yours, my office seemed to tilt. Our nonprofit? No, not the organization. A private consulting account registered under your name and social security number. I don't have a consulting account. I know. Daniel took my free hand. Jonah continued. Someone opened a business entity 18 months ago. Lydia M. Whitaker Consulting. Bank account attached. Lines of credit. 2 credit cards. It looks like money moved through it for event planning, talent management, personal branding nonsense. Payments in, cash advances out. Then it collapsed. Overdrafts, unpaid taxes, defaulted credit. I stared at the wall where children from our shelter had painted a mural of open windows. How much? Right now? Around $86,000. Maybe more after penalties. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Not because of the money. Because I could hear Brielle at 15, whispering Harrisburg like a spell. She had not changed. She had only upgraded the station. Jonah said, "There's more." Of course there is. When the bank flagged the forged withdrawal, Brielle claimed she had permission to manage the account because she was your sister and business partner. I laughed once. It came out like a cough. I've spoken to her twice in 15 years, and one was a voicemail where she forgave me for my resentment. I remember that one, Jonah said. I wanted to frame it. Daniel asked, "Can they pin any of this on Lydia?" Not if we move fast, Jonah said. File police reports. Identity theft affidavit. Freeze credit. Notify the IRS. I'll connect you with a white-collar attorney. And Lydia? Yes? Your parents are going to pressure you to say it was a misunderstanding. My phone buzzed again. Elaine. Then Russell. Then Brielle, from what must have been a holding facility number. Jonah exhaled. Right on schedule. I didn't answer. But I did listen to one more voicemail. Elaine's voice was no longer just afraid. It was sharp now, the old Elaine returning as soon as panic needed a target. Lydia, I don't know what you think you're proving. Your sister could go to prison. Prison. If you tell them she had permission, this can be handled privately. You help strangers for a living. Are you really going to abandon your own sister? There it was. The trap dressed as morality. I help homeless teenagers, so I should help the woman who stole my identity. I protect abandoned kids, so I should protect the people who abandoned me. Russell's voicemail came after. You've made your point. We're sorry you felt mistreated growing up, but this is family. Brielle has anxiety. She panicked. She didn't mean for it to get this far. If you refuse to help, whatever happens is on you. I saved that one too. Remember. Daniel looked like he wanted to throw my phone through the window. What do you want to do? He asked. The answer surprised me by arriving fully formed. I want to go home. He blinked. Home? No. I looked around my office. My files, my plants, the mural, the life I had built from wreckage. Our home. We sat at the kitchen table under the warm yellow light while Jonah came over with his laptop and a stack of forms. We ordered pizza. My hands shook when I typed my social security number into the identity theft report. Not from weakness. From memory. Every official document felt like proof that I existed separately from them. At 10:43 p.m., my phone rang again. Elaine. This time, Jonah nodded. You can answer if you want. Keep it short. I'm recording with your consent. I put it on speaker. Lydia? Elaine gasped. "Oh, thank God." I said nothing. "Listen to me. This has gotten out of control." Brielle is terrified. "What did she do?" "She made some poor choices." "What did she do, Elaine?" The use of her name cracked through the line. "She borrowed your information." Borrowed. Like my identity was a cardigan. "She forged my name." She was desperate. You know how hard things have been for her. Her career never took off the way it should have. She had debts. "Your father's retirement isn't what we thought. We were trying to keep the house." I closed my eyes. "The house?" A pause. Then Russell came on, voice booming. "Don't interrogate your mother." "Did you know?" Silence. That was the answer. Daniel's hand covered mine. "Did you know Brielle used every version of me who had survived quietly because no one was coming?" Then I said, "Brielle, you ruined your life when you signed my name." She started screaming. Elaine shouted, "Lydia, please." Russell said, "Don't you dare hang up." I looked at Jonah. He nodded. "So I gave them the only thing they had ever taught me to give: consequences." "I'm filing charges," I said. "Do not contact me again, except through an attorney." Then I hung up. For 3 days, my parents did not stop calling. When I blocked one number, another appeared. Elaine left voicemails that swung between sobbing and accusation. "Lydia, I can't sleep. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Brielle is not built for prison. You are being cruel." Not once did she say, "I'm sorry she stole from you." Not once did Russell say, "We should have protected you." Their fear had finally found them, and still, somehow, they believed it belonged to me. Jonah handled most of the legal chaos. The white-collar attorney he recommended was a woman named Priya Shah, who had the calm, surgical manner of someone who could remove a lie without nicking the truth. She helped me file everything properly: identity theft reports, fraud affidavits, credit disputes, IRS notifications, bank statements. We found forged signatures, fake contracts, emails created in my name, a scanned copy of my social security card. That last part stopped me. I had kept my documents locked away since I left home. "How did she get this?" I asked. Priya looked at the scan, then at me. "Did your parents have access when you were younger?" Of course they did. Elaine had kept every birth certificate, report card, medical form, and tax document in a metal filing cabinet in the dining room. My childhood had been an unlocked vault. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Brielle had not been careful. She had been arrogant, which is carelessness wearing perfume. She used her own phone number on applications, paid for salon appointments and boutique hotels from accounts tied to my stolen identity, transferred money to Russell twice, wrote checks to Elaine marked house. When confronted, my parents claimed they thought the money came from Brielle's brand partnerships. Brielle claimed I had verbally agreed to help her rebuild her career. Then Priya produced 15 years of blocked messages, unanswered emails, and the voicemail where Brielle said, "They're trying to make it look like I used your information, but I didn't." Not like that. Not like that became very useful. 6 months later, Brielle took a plea: identity theft, bank fraud, forgery. The sentence was not as dramatic as my parents predicted, but it was real: prison time, probation, restitution. She would likely spend years pretending she couldn't pay. I attended the sentencing because I needed to see it end. Daniel sat on one side of me, Jonah on the other. Mrs. Alvarez came too, older now, walking with a cane, but she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mija, breathe." Brielle stood before the judge in a cream blouse, hair sleek, face pale. She cried beautifully. She said she had struggled with anxiety, financial pressure, impossible expectations. She said she loved her sister and never meant to hurt anyone. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. But I stood. I looked at Brielle first, then at Elaine and Russell sitting behind her, both glaring at me like I was the danger in the room. "My sister did not make one mistake," I said. "She made hundreds. Every form she signed, every account she opened, every dollar she spent, every time she let my name carry the weight of her choices. Brielle looked down. I kept going. When I was 13, my parents left me at a train station with $4 and a dead phone because my sister lied. They called it a lesson. After that, my sister used that memory to threaten me for years. Later, money I saved to escape disappeared from my room. I never proved who took it. Elaine made a small sound, like outrage trying to disguise itself as pain. I did not look at her. For a long time, I thought justice meant they would finally understand what they did. I don't think that anymore. Some people never understand. So justice for me is telling the truth where everyone can hear it and refusing to carry consequences that are not mine. The courtroom was silent. My sister stole my identity. My parents asked me to lie to protect her. I will not. I am not responsible for what happens to her because I stopped cleaning up after her. Then I sat down. My whole body shook. But I didn't cry. Afterward, in the hallway, Elaine rushed toward me. Daniel stepped half in front of me, but I touched his arm. Elaine's face was wet and furious. "Are you satisfied?" she hissed. "Your sister is going to prison." "No," I said. "Your daughter is going to prison because she committed crimes. I am your mother." I looked at her. For years, that sentence would have split me open. That day, it landed on the floor between us and meant nothing. "You were supposed to be," I said. Russell pointed a finger at me. "You think you're better than us?" "No," I said. "I think I got away from you." Mrs. Alvarez laughed once under her breath. Jonah muttered, "Objection withdrawn." We walked out together. Outside, the air smelled like rain on hot pavement. I stood on the courthouse steps and realized I was waiting for something. Relief, maybe. Triumph. It didn't come like thunder. It came like quiet. A door closing gently. Over the next year, my credit was repaired. The nonprofit survived the scare. Priya helped ensure my name was cleared completely. Restitution arrived in tiny insulting payments, but I deposited each one into a fund at our shelter for teenagers aging out without family support. The fund has a name now. The Bell Fund. I found Mr. Bell after a long search. He had retired to Lancaster and remembered me before I finished explaining. "Little girl with the blue backpack," he said. I cried then. I told him he had changed my life by saying one true sentence in a small office at a train station. He got quiet, then said, "I always hoped somebody told you it wasn't your fault." "They did," I said. "You." Last spring, Daniel and I took the train through Harrisburg on our way to visit friends. I hadn't been back to that station in 20 years. We got off. The ticket machines were newer. The benches had changed. There was a coffee kiosk where I remembered the vending machines being. For a moment, I saw her, 13-year-old me, backpack at her feet, pretending not to be afraid. I wanted to kneel beside her and tell her everything. That she would leave, that she would eat dinner in a kitchen where no one screamed, that she would be loved without performing usefulness, that one day the phone would ring 29 times and she would finally understand. Panic is not the same as power. Daniel slipped his hand into mine. "You okay?" he asked. I looked at the station doors, the tracks, the place where my family had driven away. Then I looked at him. "Yes," I said. And I meant it, because survival was never the end of my story. It was only the station I passed through on my way home.